Imagine a world where the powerful no longer turn their backs, where nations rise not for conquests, but for justice. Imagine a moment in time when history pauses and then takes a bold new turn. That moment is now. This isn't just another headline. It's not politics as usual. This is unity like we've never seen before. 40 nations, diverse in culture, language, and belief, standing together, not out of fear, but out of unshakable purpose. They're drawing a line in the sand, and the world will never be the same again. This speech is not just about war or peace. It's about truth. It's about courage. It's about what happens when humanity finally chooses to rise together. Every word you're about to hear is a call to conscience, a challenge to silence, and a beacon for every soul still fighting for hope in the shadows. Stay with us till the end. Let this message move you, awaken you, remind you this is not the time to look away. This is the time to stand, because this time 40 nations stand together. The gathering of 40 nations is not just a show of political strength or symbolic unity. It is a response to the moral calling that history demands at this very hour. When injustice burns through borders, when human dignity is attacked, and when the powerful silence the weak, neutrality becomes a betrayal. In such moments, silence becomes complicity. But this time, the silence has been broken. The alliance of 40 nations is not merely a diplomatic gesture. It is a declaration of shared responsibility, a collective echo of conscience that refuses to look away. It is born not from treaties or pressure, but from the understanding that a wrong done to one is a threat to all. When people in different corners of the world cry out, when innocent lives are shattered and hope is buried under the rubble of war and oppression, the world cannot afford to remain fragmented. This unity is forged in the fire of past failures. It is a lesson shaped by the tragedies where help came too late or didn't come at all. In Rwanda, in Bosnia, in Syria, and in Palestine, the world has watched too many times as destruction unfolded, helpless or unwilling to act. Now, 40 nations have chosen not to wait for regret to write the next chapter. They are stepping forward, not because they are perfect, not because they agree on every issue, but because they recognize the weight of this moment. This is not unity built on convenience. It is unity born from conviction. In standing together, these nations are not simply opposing aggression or condemning injustice. They are standing for something greater than themselves. They are anchoring themselves to the fundamental truth that humanity is bound by more than borders or alliances. It is bound by the duty to protect, to defend, and to uplift. What makes this alliance powerful is not its military strength or economic weight, but its moral clarity. Each nation brings its own scars, its own stories of struggle, survival, and redemption. And now they carry those lessons into a united front, not against a single nation, but against the idea that might makes right, that power can trample peace, that truth can be buried beneath fear. When 40 nations rise in the name of justice, they become more than governments. They become guardians of a collective soul that refuses to be silent ever again. When 40 nations rise and speak in one voice, it is no longer just a meeting of leaders or a summit of interests. It is the awakening of global willpower. For too long, the world has suffered from fragmented reactions where every country stands for its own, where fear of backlash, political calculations, or economic ties have silenced the truth. But now that era is shifting. This united voice doesn't just echo in conference halls, It reverberates across the conscience of humanity, carries with it the weight of centuries, where division allowed evil to take root, where silence became the shield behind which injustice thrived. The power of 40 nations acting together isn't in their numbers alone. It lies in the decision to be bold, to be present, and to be one. Each nation could have taken a back seat, spoken in riddles, or hidden behind statements of neutrality, but instead they chose alignment. They chose courage. The coming together of 40 sovereign powers means they've set aside personal agendas, ideological conflicts, and historical grudges to build something larger than politics. They've chosen humanity. The strength of this alliance comes not from uniformity, but from resolve. These countries are not alike. Their flags may fly different colors, their tongues speak different languages, but when the world's peace is threatened and innocent lives are at stake, they have found a common ground that doesn't need translation. This coalition becomes a signal to every oppressed soul that they are not forgotten, that someone is watching, someone is standing up. It also becomes a warning to those who rule with brutality that the world will not remain disjointed in the face of tyranny. When 40 nations channel their voice into one message, that message becomes impossible to ignore. It is no longer a whisper in the dark. It is a roar that breaks walls, that pierces deception, that shakes the foundation of unchecked power. This unity changes the equation. It resets the balance. It says to every citizen of the world that justice is not dead, that the light of solidarity still burns. It is a movement driven not by politics, but by principle, a force that redefines what is possible when conscience leads and courage answers. The cost of complacency is written in the blood-stained pages of history. Every time the world chose silence over action, the consequences were devastating. When powerful nations looked the other way, atrocities unfolded without resistance, from genocides that could have been prevented to wars that escalated because warnings were ignored. The price of inaction has always been paid by the innocent. This moment, where 40 nations now stand together, it's not just a political shift. It is a reckoning. It is the result of lessons carved into the soul of global memory, a refusal to repeat the same mistakes. Complacency once came disguised as neutrality, but now the world sees clearly indifference only empowers destruction. To be passive in the face of evil is to be an accessory to it. The alliance forming now is not made up of perfect nations, nor are they driven by idealism alone. They are shaped by the weight of what has already been lost in times when action came too late. These 40 nations remember what it cost when no one stood up in time, when diplomacy became a delaying tactic and peace was nothing more than a distant wish. They know that waiting too long allows oppression to become entrenched, normalized, and permanent. What they are doing now is reclaiming the responsibility that was once neglected. By coming together, they are refusing to let history repeat itself under their watch. This is a stand against complacency, against the idea that one nation's suffering is not another's concern. The alliance acknowledges that injustice anywhere threatens justice everywhere. It recognizes that division is what has allowed crises to spiral unchecked. The power of this collective is not just in its readiness to act, but in its rejection of the comfortable lie that staying out of it is a safer choice. These 40 nations are not reacting out of fear. They are stepping forward out of purpose. They understand that if they do not draw a line now, that tomorrow it may be too late for someone else. The cost of inaction is far greater than the risk of unity. What binds them together is the shared resolve that no tyrant, no war machine, and no campaign of fear should go unchallenged because the world was too divided to care. These 40 nations are not mirrors of one another. They do not share the same culture, speak the same language, worship in the same way, or operate under the same systems of governance. But that is what makes their unity even more powerful. In a world often torn by difference, disagreement, and distrust, this alliance stands as a testament to what is possible when humanity chooses purpose over pride. Strength in diversity is not just a poetic phrase, it is a living, breathing force that challenges the very foundations of division. Each nation in this coalition carries its own identity, shaped by centuries of struggle, resistance, survival, and growth. Yet they have all chosen to set those identities side by side, not in conflict, but in collaboration. This gathering is not about erasing individuality, it is about harnessing it. Because real strength doesn't come from sameness, it comes from shared values rising from different paths. When diverse voices speak together, they create a harmony far more powerful than a single note ever could. These nations may see the world through different lenses, but they have focused their collective vision on one truth, that injustice cannot be allowed to breathe freely while the world watches. Diversity becomes their armor. It shields them from the traps of one-sided narratives and blind nationalism. It allows them to build a foundation rooted in empathy, not ego. This alliance shows that you don't have to agree on everything to stand for something. Their unity is not manufactured, it is earned through courage, humility, and the willingness to listen. It is forged in rooms where disagreements are expected, but where silence is not tolerated when lives are at stake. The beauty of this coalition lies in its imperfections, because it reflects the real world, a place of differences, contradictions, and complexity. And yet, even within that complexity, these nations have found clarity. They have found a shared purpose that transcends flags and frontiers. They stand together not because they must, but because they choose to. Because they understand that when many rise as one, they can become a force that no dictatorship, no occupation, and no injustice can ignore. In their diversity, they do not lose strength, they multiply it. This moment is a reminder that unity does not require uniformity, only commitment to something greater than oneself. When 40 nations stand united, their message becomes a warning too loud for any oppressor to ignore. It is not a threat made in arrogance, but a line drawn in clarity. The world has long been fractured in the face of tyranny, with aggressors banking on the silence of others, betting that fear and division will keep them unchecked. But this moment disrupts that calculation. The message being sent now is direct and unmistakable. Those who sow fear, who suppress freedom, who destroy lives to protect their power, will no longer move in the shadows. The era where they acted with impunity while the global community remained fragmented is ending. This is a signal to tyrants that the world is watching, and not just watching, but responding. These 40 nations are not responding with just words, but with resolve. It is a form of justice that doesn't wait for the next tragedy to act. It is preemptive in its unity and intentional in its posture. This alliance tells every dictator, warlord, and oppressor that the cost of violating human dignity has risen. It says the world has learned from its past reluctance and is no longer willing to delay justice in the name of politics. The silence that once shielded violence is being broken by a coalition too loud, too broad, and too resolute to be dismissed. This unified stand shifts the balance of power, not through weapons alone, but through legitimacy, moral strength, and global solidarity. What makes this warning powerful is that it comes not from one ideology or one region, but from a collective conscience. These nations are not rallying behind domination, but behind principle. That principle threatens the very foundation upon which tyrants build their empires: fear, isolation, and division. This gathering becomes a mirror, forcing those who abuse power to face the reality that they can no longer count on the disunity of others. It tells them that their actions will carry consequences, that their narrative will not go unchallenged, and that they will be held accountable on a stage far larger than their own borders. When the world speaks together, even the loudest tyrant cannot drown out the truth. This moment becomes a turning point, a clear sign that the time of watching in silence is over and the age of standing in defense of humanity has begun. This alliance of 40 nations marks more than just a strategic response. It represents the dawn of a new chapter in the human story. For decades, the world has been defined by cycles of conflict, where power often dictated truth and alliances shifted with convenience rather than conviction. But now, something different is happening. This time, nations are not simply reacting to a crisis. They are stepping forward with purpose, with unity, and with vision. They are choosing to define the moment rather than be defined by it. This collective action signals the rise of a new standard, one where conscience leads policy and justice shapes diplomacy. It is not the beginning of another war front. It is the beginning of accountability, of unity, forged not by fear, but by shared values. What makes this moment transformational is its potential to inspire far beyond the immediate crises. When 40 nations come together, they show the world that unity is possible, even in the face of deep differences. They prove that solidarity is not just a dream for the powerless, but a decision the powerful can make to serve something higher than themselves. This movement is not limited to one region or issue. It's a model for how the world can respond to future challenges, be it injustice, environmental collapse, or humanitarian need. The foundation laid here can echo through generations, as the moment when humanity refused to be ruled by fear and instead chose the courage to care. This is a turning point because it changes how people see their leaders, how nations see one another, and how young generations will view global responsibility. It breathes life into the idea that the world doesn't have to remain divided to be strong, that progress is not born of isolation, but of collective action. This coalition, rooted in moral clarity and mutual respect, lays the groundwork for a future where power serves people, not the other way around. In their decision to unite, these nations are not just reacting to a moment of crisis, they are creating a legacy that says when the world finally stood up together, everything changed, that when unity prevailed, so did hope, and that in standing for what was right, they shaped the future not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. This is not just a moment to remember, it is a moment to awaken. When 40 nations rise shoulder to shoulder against the weight of injustice, it becomes more than resistance. It becomes a revolution of conscience. No longer divided by politics, no longer distracted by self-interest, the world has chosen to stand for what truly matters: humanity, dignity, and truth. This unity is not an accident. It is a statement. It is a response to silence with strength, to fear with courage, and to tyranny with the undeniable power of collective will. What we are witnessing is history shifting, not because of one nation, but because the world finally decided to move as one. And that changes everything. To every listener, every heart that stayed with us through this message, thank you. May this moment inspire you to stand taller, to speak louder, and to never doubt the power of unity. The world needs your voice, your strength, your light. Good luck on your journey, and never forget, even one voice can spark change, but together we create a storm.